the problem with nationalism, the problem with populations that want to fight and die is that they keep on fighting wars. But it's not a real, and so what happens is that to solve this problem, all these nations focus on trying to grow the population as fast as possible, as much as possible. And this is what led to this massive population growth. But with more population, what was happening was that these wars were becoming deadlier and deadlier, culminating, of course, in World War II. And then by World War II, Europe had exhausted itself. Too many people had died, their civilization was destroyed. And so this allowed America to come into power, okay? America. And America had a different theory of the nation state. So the French, their theory was the social contract. The Germans, their theory is iron and blood, okay, race. The Americans had a different theory because America was a multicultural nation of immigrants who are trying to colonize the Western Hemisphere, North America, right? So for them, their theory is to create a game. The nation state becomes a game. The Constitution and government are the game masters. And what they will allow is for anyone to come to America and get rich, as long as they work hard. And this will create the greatest nation in the world. Okay? So this becomes a game where anyone can play. In fact, the more players that you have, the wealthier America becomes, right? And then after World War II, what happened was that America spread this game throughout the world, as much as it could, right? To Europe and to Japan. But there are still communist countries like China and Soviet Union, which did not want to participate in this game. They had their own game. And so what happened was that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this game conquered the world, right? You had globalization. Okay? The problem is this. Once this game keeps on going, eventually what happens is that only a few players achieve all the wealth, right? You have massive inequality. And everyone else falls into debt. Okay? And that's the world that we live in today. America created this game. It was very successful in creating tremendous wealth, and they were trying to have as many players as possible. That's why you had the population boom. But now, only a few people have all the wealth, and everyone else is in debt. In other words, these people are useless. And therefore, we need to reset the game. And the way to reset the game, of course, is to destroy the game in the first place. Therefore, have World War III, burn everything down, and start the game over again. Okay? And that's why we are in the situation we are in today. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go over some of the major ideas that allowed for this system to come into being, okay? So first, I want to look at the social contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So, Ivory, could you do me a favor and read the first passage? Okay. So, let me provide some context. This is from his book called The Social Contract. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau is arguing against slavery. And before, it was understood that slavery is a good system because the master is nice to the slave. As long as the master is nice to the slave should be happy. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau says, no, that cannot be true. Under no circumstance can a slave ever be happy, okay? And he explains why. So, Ivory, can you read, please?
To renounce your liberty is to renounce your status as a man, your rights as a human being, and even your duties as a human being. There can't be any way of compensating someone who gives up everything. Such a renunciation is incompatible with a man's nature. To remove all freedom from his will is to remove all morality from his actions. Finally, an agreement to have absolute authority on one side and unlimited obedience on the other. What an empty and contradictory agreement that would have to be. Isn't it clear that if we are entitled to take anything and everything from a person, we can't be under any obligation to him? And isn't that fact alone, the fact that there is no equivalence, nothing to be exchanged, between the two sides, enough to nullify the agreement? What right can my slave have against me? Everything that he has is mine, his right is mine, and it doesn't make sense to speak my right against myself.
Okay, so the argument is this. Our freedom is given to us by God. Our freedom is what connects us to God. So our freedom cannot be surrendered. If we surrender our freedom, if someone takes our freedom away from us, that is surrendering our humanity. That is breaking our connection to God. Therefore, it is better to die than be a slave. And that was their thinking during the French Revolution, right? You had all these citizens. They have absolutely no experience with firearms. But they were running into cannon fire against professional soldiers because they were like, give me liberty or give me death. Because without my liberty, I am nothing. Okay, so this is a really important concept. And then, can you read this below?
I am continually astonished that such a simple sign of good government isn't recognized, or perhaps men do recognize it but aren't honest enough to say so. What is the purpose of any political association? The preservation and prosperity of its members. And what is the surest sign of their preservation and prosperity? Their number and their population growth. That's the sign you're looking for. Other things being equal, the unquestionably best government is the one under which the population increases most, without external help from naturalizing foreigners or establishing colonies. The government under which the population shrinks is the worst. Over to you, calculators. Count, measure, compare.
Okay, this is a really important idea. Okay, so the first is liberty is the most important value. And the second idea is a good government, a good society should focus on population growth, on having as many people as possible, because that's the best sign that you're thriving as a society, okay? So because of these two ideas, okay, population growth and then liberty, the French will become the greatest empire in Europe at this time. So this is France in the dark green, and they will colonize and conquer everything in the green. And you can see how vast it is, right? So this shows you the power of the nation state based on two ideas. The first idea is liberty is all that matters. Second idea is grow the population as fast as possible. Okay? So of course, what happens, as I mentioned, is that the Germans who are being conquered by the French, they get upset, and their intellectuals come up with a new theory of nationalism. This is Johann Fichte, who is considered the father of German nationalism. And his argument is that it is language that binds us as humans. Okay? So for Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it's liberty that we should strive for. It's liberty that gives us value as human beings. But for Johann Fichte, it's language. It's language that binds us to the past. It's language that binds us together. It's language that's worth fighting for. It's race, nation, blood. Okay? And this becomes the philosophy of the German state. At this time in history, Germany was divided into many hundreds of different kingdoms. It is Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck of Prussia, who will unify the German people into one Germany, okay? Often called the Second Reich. And so, can you read, Ivory? This is a speech, or his famous Iron and Blood speech. Okay.
The position of Prussia in Germany will not be determined by its liberalism, but by its power. Prussia must concentrate its strength and hold it for the favorable moment, which has already come and gone several times. Since the treaties of Vienna, our frontiers have been ill-designed for a healthy body politic. Not through speeches and majority decisions will the great questions of the day be decided. That was the great mistake of 1848 and 1849, but by iron and blood.
Okay, all right. So the idea here is that, listen, we're a German nation, okay? And as a nation state, as a people, we must protect our freedom by going to war. Okay, it's only through war that we can survive and thrive as a people. But how do you fight wars? Well, you fight wars, and this is really important, by making sure your population is taken care of, okay? So can you read, Ivory?
The real grievance of the worker is the insecurity of his existence. He is not sure that he will always have work. He is not sure that if he will always be healthy, and he foresees that he will one day be old and unfit to work. If he falls into poverty, even if only through a prolonged illness, he is then completely helpless, left to his own devices, and society does not currently recognize any real obligation toward him, beyond their usual help for the poor, even if he has been working all the time ever so faithfully and diligently. The usual help for the poor, however, leaves a lot to be desired, especially in large cities, where it is very much worse than in the country.
So Bismarck will turn Germany into the most powerful nation in the world by recognizing that it's not just soldiers who contribute to the war effort, it's also your people as well. Because it's your people who make the machines of war, the machine guns, the artillery, the munitions. And therefore, you have to make sure they're healthy. You don't want to send sick soldiers to the battlefield, right? You don't want sick workers as well. That's why he passed a lot of progressive worker reforms, including health insurance, accidental insurance, old age pension, workers' protection, children protection, okay? It is because he recognizes that a nation state is first and foremost about making warriors. And if you want to win, you have to make sure you have as many people as possible and everyone is contributing to the war effort. And to do that, you need to make sure that everyone is taken care of, including your soldiers, including your workers. Okay? And it was Mussolini who basically understood that the real purpose of a nation state is to fight wars. In fact, it is wars that give people meaning in their lives.